but it says that open in Google Docs.
Mr. Cobarubias, are you able to help Bobby Joe get a typable, if she's attempting to take minutes in an agenda, can you help her?
Yeah, let me see what I got.
Yeah, I received it. It says Word, but when I go into it, it says open with Google Docs.
Yeah, are you on a Chromebook?
Yes.
Okay, let me see what we got. You're looking for a copy of the agenda, right?
Well, she sent it to me, yeah, the copy in a Word document or Word format.
All right, I'm going to copy it and send it to you as a Google Doc so you could add to this one.
Okay.
Bobby Joe, if you want to let us know when you have a document that you're ready to type in, we'll just
on its way.
It just
we'll pause a minute until you're ready.
Should be on its way.
I got it. Why is it not? There's a box up in the corner that has like 3 dots that keep on moving. Oh, now it lets me type. I don't know what the deal is. Okay, I'm ready.
All right. As long as you are ready, we will come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Petke, if you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Seeger?
Here.
Mr. Forbes? Mr. Holman? Mr. Scheller?
Sorry, my mute was off. Stan Forbes, I'm here.
Mr. Holman? Mr. Scheller? Mrs. Petke here. Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Johnson?
I am here as well. Thank you. Dr. Opper, can you verify publication of meeting, please?
Yes, I can. And Mr. Scheller did indicate he might be arriving a little late to tonight's meeting.
Thank you. All right, unfinished business. Item A, consider parameters of the School District of Manawa School Resource Officer Program. This past week, Dr. Opper and I and Mr. Scheller met with Chief Gorman and Officers Borst and Weslowski. And we had some conversation about what the expectations are from the police department. And I think that they are different than what we had ever talked about as a board. So I felt that it was imperative that we have a discussion before moving this forward to the public at our annual meeting at the end of the month. So one of the pieces that Dr. Opper was able to send out this afternoon, and I apologize, I didn't request it until about 5:30, so it didn't get to our inboxes until about 10 minutes to 6. But I had asked her to please reshare the school perception survey. And the pieces that I was most concerned about was what people thought about part-time versus full-time. And my recollection was correct. The majority of respondents felt that part-time, 24 hours per week, was desirable. And a vast majority of our respondents also felt that they needed more information, period. And that was throughout the whole entire survey, that they really felt, about a quarter felt that they really needed more information before they could make a decision on it. Chief Gorman did indicate to us in our meeting the other day that they have no desire to provide us with a part-time school resource officer, that the only option would be full-time. And there were a few other points that were different than what we had anticipated. And as a note, Mr. Scheller arrived at 6:04 p.m.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Opper, if you recall some of the items, our preference was that a school resource officer would have a bachelor's degree. Part of that reasoning is that they're going to be a bit more broad. Instead of having a technical degree that's going to an associate's degree that's going to focus on specifically law enforcement, they're going to have a bit broader sociology, psychology. Not that those aren't part of that associate's degree, but it is just a bit broader than what we would see with an associate's. Another item that had came in was a vehicle. We're asked the other day what we were going to do about a squad car. That was a surprise as well. And the city did indicate, Chief indicated that the city would pay 25% of the cost. So, thoughts?
Would it help to just pull one item apart at a time? So the first thing that President Johnson had talked about was the job description. And in the job description are the qualifications of the candidate that you'd be seeking. So this is really important as we go into the situation, to be clear about what qualifications do you expect the candidate to have?
Because we're pretty firm on we want an associate's degree, and they're pretty firm on they want a bachelor's degree.
Vice versa, Bruce. They
Oh, the other way around.
And Chief indicated, and I don't disagree with him. I don't know. I would probably actually defer. I see Ms. Conley's on here. I would defer to Ms. Conley and Mr. Wolfgram and Dr. Opper as far as what they feel is appropriate relating to our students. The chief did indicate that he can not find anyone right now at all. It's very, and these concerns have been echoed. I talked to Sandy Wills last week. The sheriff's department is struggling. People simply are not going into law enforcement for a variety of reasons. It's very hard to staff positions, and many that are coming out do not have a bachelor's degree. They have an associate's degree. everyone that graduates does have to do additional training, and I believe it is 720 hours of training that every police officer, regardless if they have a bachelor's or an associate's, it's the same training that they have to go through. But I do get his point that if you can't find a candidate that would meet those educational criteria, he's not going to be able to hire it. But again, so am I married to that idea? No, I'm not. But again, I would probably defer to staff as to how they feel.
Do we know what an associate's degree, what kind of classes they offer? I mean, is it anything close to what we want?
They're going to have gen ed, but then it's going to be more specialized because it's through the tech stand. So like any associate's degree,
Right.
It's just simply not as broad.
Right. I went to school there. But if you're not going to get the mental health issue, isn't that what we're kind of going towards? You want to, yeah? And that's more in college degrees?
That was my thought. Ms. Conley just chimed in. Associate's degree in law enforcement does require some psychology classes. They're going to do some gen eds. I mean, it is going to be psychology. It's going to be some sociology. You know, some will argue that that's part of our policing problem now, is that we have a lot of associate's degrees out there versus a lot of bachelor's degrees. 15, 20 years ago, you saw far more officers that did have bachelors. And now it has become a faster tracking into career, just like many careers.
And partly that's because there's such a shortage. They, like many fields, healthcare, education, we're all experiencing shortages right now. So trying to get qualified individuals in the field or get them interested in pursuing the field, you know, you do see people definitely pursuing the technical college. The cost of credits is sometimes more affordable. So there are many reasons why that's an appealing route to go, and some do go on then as their careers progress and they do get that bachelor's degree, or are encouraged to do so as they move up the ranks. So it's kind of a matter of, you know, where do you want to begin? For me, it seems to me the most important qualification will be the individual's interpersonal skills, how well they're able to work with young people in particular, that they understand how to work with young people. And then I think, of course, secondarily, from my perspective, because first it's the interpersonal skills, their depth of knowledge of understanding of the law, and how it relates to how it's enforced in a public school environment. To that end, I think the course that we've put into the job description that we would pay for as a district, I would suggest the SRO, National Association of School Resource Officer basic course, is quite thorough and focuses on laws that pertains to youth and working in the schools. And it is it also includes a 1-year membership in the NASRO, and that's $495 presently, and that can be taken online.
So maybe another thing to the point of the educational piece, a good equivalent, I believe, would be, for example, if you look at an RN, you can get to an RN pathway through a technical college with an associate's degree, or you can get it through a traditional 4-year college with a bachelor's degree. You still are going to be an RN. And, you know, ultimately, are the skill sets the same? Yes, you have to pass the same clinicals. You have to do everything. Your registration, your national registry, everything is the same, as it would be for police officers as well. There was a huge push for healthcare to run an associate's degree, and now that is actually flipping the other way, and it's very difficult, as I understand it, for some area hospitals to get any type of advancement if you do not have a bachelor's degree now. So for me personally, I'm not, that's small potatoes in this conversation. But I really did not know how the rest of the board felt. If you were real firm about educational criteria, or, you know, are we just happy that someone is licensed and as a police officer, and we don't necessarily care how they got to that path.
Is a college graduate gonna want more money than an associate degreed police officer?
Arguably, that's possible.
It is. I don't believe that the city differentiates, though. Not from the charts that they've shared with us. I believe that from what they've shared with us, they just simply have a pay scale.
Really?
But yes, arguably yes. Yeah. Well, I don't believe that he's hiring anybody with a bachelor's, frankly. I mean, I don't think that the candidate pool is,
Right.
I mean, unless your determination is that you want to be a chief, or that you're looking to really advance yourself, I think that most people that are graduating now are graduating from the tech school and graduating with an associate's degree. And Fox Valley Tech is a phenomenal criminal justice program.
Right. Yeah, you just got to get the right person, I would think. I mean, I don't have a problem with the associate degree officer. But you would be, who gives the interviews? Do they pick them, or we pick them, or how does that go?
That's it. I think a lot of.
Do that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It was a joint thing is what we would like to do.
Okay. Is he?
I think a lot of it's going to
Oh.
determine like the personality of the officer. Actually, I think associate's degree or bachelor's degree isn't going to make a whole lot of difference. I don't think. I think it's going to be how they work with the kids and stuff like that. What their background is as far as that. I think that's almost more important than the 2 degrees, I believe. I mean, that's my beliefs on it. Just from back when we were in school and who we had, I mean, it was kind of like the officer that we had back in the day was very friendly, got along with the kids and everything. And then, you know, they kind of respected him on that aspect too, as well as being a police officer. So I think it went very well. So.
Would someone want to make a motion if you're comfortable to the end
So they
to
were
change the wording to 2-year associate degree or bachelor's degree, if you were lucky enough to find somebody with a bachelor's who wanted to apply?
What did some of the other board members think?
No, what we were talking about, now the other day, they wanted full-time, and we were talking half-time. We made a comment about in London has a half-time guy now or something like that, and you were gonna look into that. We would maybe talked about tag team and sharing. That was a nowhere thing, or?
Well,
That'll be the next. We're gonna break it down section by section. We'll get to that, Bruce.
Okay.
This is specifically like if we do bullet point by bullet point, it'll be, I think, a lot more efficient than trying to roll everything all into one. So this would really just be the educational piece.
Okay.
Russ Johnson here. I guess I'm with Stan. As long as they're qualified, I'm okay either way.
So would somebody like to make a motion regarding the educational piece?
Stan Forbes, I make a motion to for the educational SRO to have an associate's degree.
Or bachelor's, just for clarity?
I thought we're just doing one or the
Either
other.
or, which, no, we could do either. We could leave it open to either.
Oh, I thought we were picking one.
No, right
No.
now it sits at bachelor's was originally the job description, which we had
Sure.
approved. So this would change it to open it up to allow either a bachelor's or an associate.
Okay. All right. So associate degree or bachelor's degree.
Yes. So I have a motion by Mr. Forbes. Do I have a second?
Russ
Scheller,
Johnson.
Mr. Scheller, I think, beat everybody to the for that second.
Yeah.
So a motion has been made and seconded to allow for an associate or a bachelor's degree for the school resource officer for their educational qualifications. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we will proceed by a roll call vote. Mr. Seeger,
Aye.
Mr. Forbes,
Aye.
Mrs. Pelkey,
I think I saw that she had left the meeting. I don't know if something happened to her internet.
did, but I believe that she is on by telephone as well. Let me just take a look here once. I think that is the last four of her. Nope, it is not. Okay, so we
There she
currently
is.
are missing Mrs. Heck. Oh, she's back.
Oh,
All right,
Okay, I've
Is
lost
there-
you guys
time for
twice. I totally lost you guys twice. So I missed the whole discussion between the bachelor's and the associate. Then I got back on, and then you guys were talking about a vote, and then I lost you again. So I apologize for that.
let me bring you up to speed. So we had a motion by Mr. Forbes with a second by Mr. Scheller to allow for either an associate or a bachelor's degree for the educational. I lost my train of thought. For the educational criteria for the resource officer, and we had begun to do roll call vote. Mr. Seeger voted yes, Mr. Forbes voted yes, and then Mrs. Pecky, you were up.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Scheller,
Aye, yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
and it is a yes from myself as well. Motion carries by roll call vote with Mr. Holman absent. All right, next piece of the puzzle is full-time, part-time. The majority of the community in polling supported part-time. In conversations that we've had as a board, it's been part-time. And the chief said that they absolutely will not do part-time at all. It is time, or they will have no part of it whatsoever. We certainly could look to share with another school district that has a part-time officer. We could take the other half of their time and certainly can share. I believe that districts like Bowler and Gresham are currently doing that they share a school resource officer. I'm not sure if Marion is sharing with somebody as well. I know that they do a part-time. And we certainly could look at neighboring districts like Wapaka or New London. New London and Wapaka both have part-time in addition to full-time, and it might be a way to round out their officer. Or we could look at contracting with the county. And I believe in the past you had talked to Sheriff Wills, Dr. Opper, correct? And it was something that he would be interested in doing?
Yes, but respectfully, he said, not unless Manawa PD did not want to participate, because of course he wouldn't disrespect his colleagues locally, but if they were either not interested or not able to participate, he would consider it. And to Bruce's earlier question, I have not contacted anybody at this point until we find out whether or not it's part-time or full-time. Then I can put feelers out, but we haven't even asked the constituency yet if this is something they want, which will happen at the annual meeting. But I could put out some preliminary feelers once I know what you're looking for. The survey that I'm hoping you can see, although it might be small on your screens, I'm not sure what you see on your side. The proposal at that time was an SRO part-time for 24 hours per week. Then there was the 40 hours per week, which would be considered full-time for the I'm not sure category. And so you can see kind of how people weighed in there. Your all resident group, your staff group, green is parents, and then the non-parent, non-staff group is the purple.
It looks like to me that everybody needs a little bit more information.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think are we considering having these people go to like basketball games, football games, that's kind of stuff too after school curricula? So it's going to be pretty hard to share, I would assume. If we were just using them in the school hours, I could see even considering part-time, but yeah, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to share on that part of it, I guess.
We did put it in the job responsibilities to help with those kinds of things, but currently we do not have an officer at every event. And depending on who we share with, it's not impossible to be at the start of one event and at the end of another, to have a presence. And that's often how the officers have kind of, moved through, especially when county officers are visiting us. I'll see them pass by, maybe stay for 15 to 30 minutes and then head out again.
Yeah. I guess it depends. Do we or do we not want our kids in school to have some kind of or to have a relationship kind of with them also to familiarize yourself with them? I think that's a huge part of how they actually act in school and stuff like that, just to gain respect and stuff like that. Me personally, I think we should consider full-time, but that's just me. I just remember how we went through it. Not that, I guess it was quite a few years ago, 20 years ago or whatever. And the person was at pretty much all the events, always there, whether you had a question or a concern, or he needed to, I guess, do his duty. I don't know.
Or her.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Or her.
And I had a guy back in the day, so whatever, but
many of the officers nowadays are women.
Yep. But I think, I don't know. It's nice to have them there all the time. Otherwise, I think that's where it may be fine, but you may also have problems as soon as, he leaves at this time or he comes at this time. We'll just, get whatever out of the building or what, I guess there's two different ways to look at it. So.
Mr. Wolfgram, how many calls have you made so far this school year?
0 so far. I know the police was present for our very first day, but I was of their own accord. So other than that, I have not had to call for a single instance this year.
Ms. Brower, how many calls have you made?
I've made 0 calls.
Thank you. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but we're we're 1/9 of the school year in, so, or 1/10 if you include the month for summer school.
So another issue too that we discovered last year is the number of times that we have actually called for service versus what is reported. So the other day it was reported to us that there were 90 calls for service last year. And there were times, for example, where a call was made because citations needed to be issued for things like vaping. And if multiple students were involved, even though it was one trip to the school, it then became X amount of calls. So there is differences in tracking between the way that the district tracks it versus the way that the police department tracks it. And Mr. Wolfram probably can answer that far better than what I can.
I think an experience that I've had so far this year, I can't speak to what happened in the past, but I do know that we had a couple instances this year where there were complaints to the department for after school hours, and they came to school and interviewed students. And I don't know if they consider that being called to school when it had nothing to do with us at school. There was also an incident where a parent contacted an officer who was the child's coach. And it got, I think it might have even got put in to, like, it was a complaint about possible bullying. And then it may have got put in as an incident through the department when it was just to their coach, not necessarily to an officer. So I know I was very confused by that situation.
I have a question. Is bullying considered an offense that a police officer should handle? Or how you work that?
I think it goes to bullying again is a protected class, and it goes to an imbalance of power. So just because somebody says something mean to you doesn't mean that it qualifies as bullying. So it has to be repeated where there's an imbalance of power. I have not necessarily tapped into the police department as it pertains to bullying on a regular basis. Those things are usually handled. And do I think some of these things go underreported? Perhaps. But again, I think it's something that goes towards the relationship piece rather than calling in for citations or anything that might be needed for the police.
And Dan, if the bullying did rise to the level of a disorderly conduct, if that were the nature of the way the person was being treated, you'd make that call.
Absolutely. You know, we would have documentation of a repeated past, and we would engage the police if it was egregious enough. But I would say the instances of the bullying that we've had to do are rare. Oftentimes, what we get called into that the police might come into the building is some of the cyberbullying that happens outside of the school day, where parents might contact the police because these things are happening outside of the school day, and they might want to come on in to try to respond to the questions or concerns from the parent.
Well, if they do that outside of school hours, that's technically not our problem, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't, you know, in that when it comes into the school, it rarely, if it's an educational setting, if these things are happening on evenings and weekends and those types of things filter into the classroom, it can be disturbing at times. So because the children don't differentiate between evenings, weekends, and the school day, it's just one continuous cycle.
But it is true that as we examine things, if the child's in imminent danger, it needs to be investigated right away. But Dan and/or as Dean of Students, Jeff or Danny would have to examine the situation and determine if something illegal has happened, or if they've had a code of conduct violation, in which case there may be harsh repercussions at school. Lots of forms of discipline are available up and through, an expulsion. But that doesn't always mean there's been illegal behavior. There may be, but not in every instance.
And additionally, probably to the point of the differences in reporting, what we consider one contact, because we've called them in to handle, for example, an issue with vaping because we want to have citations issued, and it's 3 students. For them, it is 3 reports. It is 3 separate investigations. So I'm sure that that's where a lot of that difference comes in, as far as numbers between what the district reports and versus what they report. But we consider one call a call, whereas they might consider that one call to be 3 calls, because they then have 3 different cases in which they have to follow up.
So are we to assume that Mr. Gorman is not going to budge from his requests? If we go part-time with another district, are we stepping on his toes, or how does that work?
That I can't answer, but I will tell you that he told me that that is not negotiable. He told Bruce and I the other day, Stan, that was not something that he was willing to negotiate. He feels that because we had 90 calls to the district last year, that it is imperative that we have a full-time officer, because 90 calls could not be handled by a part-time officer.
And I understand that, Russ Johnson here, but what is that going to cost the district? And I know that's down the list, but still.
I do believe Carmen's on. All of it's an estimate because it's a range. It could be a single officer with a single medical plan. It could be an officer with a family and a family medical plan. So again, they usually get varied pay depending on their level of experience. A newer officer at a lower rate. A person with a few more years of experience might get a little higher rate of pay. So there is a range that I believe the city gave us some very rough numbers that are about a year old. And I'm talking, so I give Carmen a little bit of time to look up the information, because then she rolled that into Fund 80 for roughly the difference in how much that would cost the citizenry. Are you ready? Have I talked long enough, or should I fill some more airspace?
Well, you should have told me that you were talking so that I could look. I was listening. From my recollection, and I'm just looking right now, but I believe it was 65 to 80,000. I think was their range of somebody, single person versus person with a family plan kind of a thing. But I will continue to look and jump in here in a moment.
I actually pulled it up out of our shared drive that we had the other day from Dr. Opper. So it was family plan was $66,256 and 86 cents, and a single was $53,225 and 70 cents.
And is that our portion of it, or is that our portion of it?
That would be 100% of the cost. And so to break it down, at 100% of the cost, it would be, the mill rate would be $9.57 per, for a family, and $9.53 for a single. So for a $100,000 home, it would be about $1,760 for a family and $1,420 for a single. And if we take 25% off of that, if the city is willing to pay 25%.
So that's after that funding? That's
That
before
would
that
be-
funding, isn't it?
That would be what we would be taxing for. In comparison, if you looked at 3 days of service a week, a family would run us about $7.40 increase on a $100,000 home, and a single would be about $5.90. And that's not a cost sharing. That was just a
So you're
flat out
talking
prorate.
$2 a year per 100,000 difference.
Well, the difference between full-time versus contracting out for 3 days a week is going to be about $10.
Yeah, 7.
17.
and
Oh,
7,
you
yeah.
said 17. That's right.
Yeah, 17 versus 7.
Okay.
And that's 25% of what the community would pay. Is that the way it goes?
Yeah.
The community would pay 75% of that cost. The city would pay 25%.
The city would pay 25%, and you cut out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The city would pick up 25%, and the school district,
Okay.
the taxpayers would pick up 75%.
So what does the funding pick up?
That would be it. We would tax to pay for that. So in lieu of cutting, we would either have to cut something, so we'd have to cut staff, or we would have to find another source of funding. So we can utilize Fund 80 and have the entire cost come out of Fund 80, which is our community fund.
And again, none of this has been negotiated. You know, part of it is having President Johnson and Treasurer Scheller negotiate. I mean, each side has offered ideas, information, but there's been actually no official negotiation.
So would there be another meeting with Mr. Gorman in the near future? To try
I would
and
expect there would be another school board meeting with the city.
do you go
This
school
is
board meeting, or do
actually-
you go with this Joanne, Bruce, and you were there, right? And Melanie. Would you do another 3-person discussion?
I would think there would have to be some kind of follow-up meeting. But for the sake of clarity, the purpose of tonight's meeting is for President Johnson and Treasurer Scheller to report back the position of the police department to see what you'd like to counter with. Where do you stand on some of these issues, so that they know what to take back to the discussion in terms of full-time or part-time, 25% and 75%, you know, they need something tangible to discuss in that conversation based on the full board. Because remember, as individuals, you don't have any authority. You only have authority when you come together as a Board of Education.
Yeah.
From what I can see right now, Bruce Scheller, from what I can see right now, going back for a full time is a waste of time because he won't go for that anyway. So my take on the meeting, I kind of went, all this discussion is almost moot. I'm almost totally the opposite way, in my opinion, is the staff could probably handle this. You know, give the staff credit for knowing the kids, you know, mental health, all that stuff. And we're talking about hiring, and the guy's saying, well, got to be full-time or nothing. So it's like, to me, it's almost like, why are we pursuing this? You know, with the COVID thing right now, it's probably not a good year to do it anyway, but that's just my one opinion, but I'm kind of wondering why we're even pursuing this right now.
And maybe a different way to look at it, instead of talking about talking about negotiating with the city, I mean, it was made very, very clear that there is no negotiating whether it is full-time or part-time. If we're going to contract through the city of Manawa, it has to be full-time. Maybe what we should be looking at is we have the annual meeting in which the taxpayers are going to vote for this or vote against it. And how exactly do we wish to frame the question? You know, do we wish to offer the option of only having a full-time person? Do we wish to offer both? And then if the city declines, then we would look to fill it elsewhere. Because ultimately that decision is going to be made by the taxpayers. And we just need to have as much information as we possibly can to present to them when we go to this annual meeting.
Russ Johnson here. I like the idea of offering both. And can we even put on there what the rough cost would be to the taxpayers if we go full-time, or, you know, what the cost would be full-time versus part-time to the taxpayers? That would be that's my thought. Again, only my thought.
Me personally, I'd like to have another meeting with the city and be a part of it. But that's just me.
We have time for that before the annual meeting to schedule something like that? It didn't sound like the chief really wanted to, unless we were kind of saying yes to it. It didn't sound like he was too worried about having more meetings.
Well, and the annual meeting is when the citizenry will say yes or no. I think they're going to have questions though. So I think, to President Johnson's point, the citizens are going to want to know, what are they voting yes or no for? Or is it multiple choice? Is it full-time, part-time? You'd have to define what you mean by part-time. 0.5, 3 days a week, you know, you can define part-time, or no.
Well, I don't think we even have the option of part-time as far as what you guys are telling us, as far as your meeting with Chief Gorman. I mean, it's full-time or nothing, unless you want to go out somewhere else. And I don't think that's a very good idea. I don't think the community is going to be too happy about that either, to go to Clintonville or to New London. I don't think that's a very good idea as far as the district to move out of the city.
The sheriff department already serves us on a regular basis, so you know that
it's kind of like a big slap in the face for our community, though. I don't know. We're supposed to be tighter knit than that. I know he's supposed to give a little bit. We're supposed to give a little bit. That's why, if there is time, I would be more than happy to meet with them again, or have a chance to meet with them.
Unless we're changing our stance. With our stance, we were kind of looking at halftime and they were looking at full-time. So you're trying to say we need to change our stance, or, you know, for what we're offering the community?
I'm not saying we need to change our stance, but I mean, I guess I wasn't a part of it, so it's really hard for me to judge off of. I mean, I talked a little bit to Chief Gorman probably a month and a half ago about this, because I wasn't part of that meeting a long time ago, you know, because that was before I was here, just to try to get a little bit of information. And I guess I'm not sold on walking away from our city police right now for, you know, and just going somewhere else. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
But Chief Gorman is not going to budge from the full-time officer. He won't go for a part-time. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Well,
whether it's part-time Manawa or part-time from another town, he wants full-time.
Right. And,
Okay.
and Luke, if you would have been part of the meeting that we were all in, he was very adamant to us.
He was about ready to walk out.
It's his way or the highway.
Exactly. So you can't negotiate with that.
Well, I look at it too, as far as how much you actually want the officer to be a part of this, though. Like if you want him at games and all that stuff, he's going to hit 40 hours, no problem.
But if the community doesn't agree to a full-time officer, isn't that what we're kind of getting at also?
Yeah, and we don't know. I mean, everybody was looking for more knowledge as far as the graphs were concerned. It was pretty steady as far as yes, no, and the people that wanted more information was a lot higher than the other ones.
And I think too, Chief Gorman, it's more, he's looking at it more from a law enforcement is what we need the SRO for, and we're looking at it more so as we want it for mental health is more by what we are looking at. So we're kind of coming at it from different ways too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that too. Honestly, I feel like if you have a school resource officer, any of your issues are going to go down too automatically, no matter what. So it's going to go the other way regardless, just by having somebody there. I don't think they're going to spike because you have an officer in the building. They're not going to go. They're going to go down regardless. Obviously, this year, like everybody else was saying, this year is a weird year. Yeah, nobody's called or anything. Everybody's on the edge. Everybody just wants to stay in school. I mean, that's great. You know, I get it. I don't know. I guess at this point, I'd rather not have any than go out of the city to get a officer.
So where does that kind of leave us? I guess we're having a nice open discussion.
I agree with Russ Johnson. That meeting was ugly. Does anybody else agree? I mean, it was very uncomfortable.
It was absolutely uncomfortable. And that's probably the kindest way. As Mrs. Risky just happened to type in the chat box, the city was disrespectful to the board. I think that a lot of people left that meeting that may have been supportive to having an SRO, and I think that it turned them from doing so.
And I wasn't there, so I can't, you know.
It was like we were on trial.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many years has it been since we had an SRO? I mean, it's been quite a while, hasn't it?
2012, 2011, somewhere in there.
We had one when I didn't we still have one when I first started, and they were just leaving then?
No, it was done before that. Maybe 2013, if I recall. And it did not end on a good note at all. There was a lot of really bad feelings.
Well, what I had heard was there was overstepping where it should have been principal and dean of student addressing school discipline. The officer was stepping in and disciplining the students in the manner that the officer felt was appropriate, rather than following board policy.
Yep, I also heard that.
You know, and we agreed that, you know, we would certainly set that aside. I mean, it's been 2 and 2 strikes. There were issues with the one previous to that as well that I had heard. I didn't have kids in high school at that time, so I don't know how that one worked out. But we agreed as a board that we would set aside those negative feelings that had happened in the past and that we would re-examine the topic. But I think if you don't have the right situation and you don't have the right training and you don't have the right person, it's not going to go well again either. And in the past, I do not believe that they had a full-time officer, but I'm not sure.
Bobby Joe, would you want to share your experience from the WASB convention last year and the sectional that we had? I hope you're still there. I didn't check to see if you're still there.
She is not, unfortunately, unless she's on by telephone.
Well, if she comes back, maybe we'll.
Brian, how do you unmute yourself on telephone?
It is *6.
Because I think I see her phone number up there, so I think that might be her. Additionally, Stan and Bruce, didn't you also attend a sectional at the WASB convention 2 years ago?
Yeah, well,
about school resource officers?
yeah. Well, my take on that was everybody says most of them were half-time or even quarter time, and most of them were about the relationship. You know, and nobody ever mentioned the law enforcement aspect. They all mentioned the relationship aspect. And like I say, they were all half-time. He said, we're very happy with having it. You know, it was half-time and quarter time. So nobody they talked to said full-time. So, but they were all about relationships. So, I mean, some of your, dean of students, he's all about relationships. Some of our, counselors and stuff. So we must have a lot of that there already, is what I'm thinking. But like I said, that was kind of their take on it. Those other schools was, it was all about the relationship building. And they were all like, we're happy to have it. So halftime, quarter time, so they didn't have them there much. But they, it was all about the relationship. They didn't mention the law aspect of it.
And additionally, when we kind of looked at this, we looked at districts that were comparable in size. The other day during the meeting, the chief said, well, New London has a full-time officer and so does Wapaka, and that's absolutely correct. But their student body is also substantially larger than what ours is. And when we look at schools that are comparable in size to us, most of them are doing just a part-time. In fact, I think when we did the look at the conference numbers, and I'm just going to see if I can find that really quickly. Even things like Wittenberg, I believe, had done a part-time and they had purchased from Shawano County. Or perhaps Shawano County did it pro bono. I don't recall exactly. So let's see here. Bondwell and Tigerton are serviced by Shawano County. And Gresham and Bowler are half-time. Another one indicated 1 to 2 days per week. Another one was half-time. There was only one of those districts that had a full-time, and I believe that was Menominee Indian. We had pulled Wild Rose, Wittenberg, Burnhamwood, Iowa Scandinavia, Port Edwards, Marion, Almond, Bancroft, Gresham, and Menominee Indian School District. And I believe Menominee Indian was the only one that was full-time. For some of them, they contracted with the county for 1 day a week. Another one was Shawano County funded it. One was a $10,000. They shared it $5,000, and then the village matched it at $5,000. In 8 years, they said they've never utilized that much. Marion takes 50% of the full-time Marion police officers' time, so they have one full-time, or I shouldn't speak to that. There is a full-time Marion police officer, and the district for half of the salary and insurance for that officer. Stockbridge Muncie PD supplies the Progressive and Bowler. And another one indicated that the district funded it 100%.
So
And
a
so
good
most of them
resource.
about college training and educator mentor relationship building is really what all the districts that had been polled talked about.
So a good resource and a person to talk to who can perhaps see it from both sides. The presentation that Bobby Joe and I attended was the Barron Area School District. You might remember the Jamie Kloss abduction case. It just so happens their board president was also the lead investigator on that case. And so he and the superintendent together presented their situation. In Barron, they have 1,300 students, and they share an officer with a neighboring community. So it's halftime for them and the neighboring community. And they, again, really focused on relationships and reassuring the community. But the bottom line was that even with an officer, had an officer been full-time, they couldn't have prevented that situation from occurring. So he gave a very realistic talk about perceived and actual safety, and would be a good resource because he's both their board president and was the lead investigator on the case. So he understands both law enforcement and the responsibility of a board of education.
What's our chances of doing some of the things that the other schools have done? One said that you had mentioned that the district paid for 100% of it, or the county would pay 100%. I mean, if otherwise we have to cut something, correct? If it comes out of our pocket.
No, well, the reason why we talked about utilizing Fund 80 was specifically for that reason, so that we are not cutting anything. You know, we talked about that as a board, we talked about that as a community, and it was overwhelming that we're not going to cut a staff member in order to have an SRO. That was not acceptable. That's where the Fund 80 came into play, that we can just utilize Fund 80 and the community fund and just essentially tax specifically for that service. So it's not impacting our Fund 10 and our staff members or our operating expenses.
So we could do a full-time officer.
If the constituents.
Correct, if that is what would want that.
If what?
If the
constituents want
that. That's why it's a board resolution at the annual meeting.
Okay, but there are other issues that he wanted. He wanted a police car. Are we supposed to pay for that too?
He said that was budgeted for already in their budget, but the first year they were going to pay for it, and second year they wanted to see what portion or whatever we were going to pay in the second year. So they already have that budgeted for a new car if we say yes to this, or if the constituents say yes to this.
And then we're supposed to pay for it, correct? Or part of it?
Second year we were supposed to pay. They didn't come up with a number, but.
So a common thing we do in the district for staff members who have to travel for work, or even for you as board members, is we pay the state rate for mileage.
Okay.
So we've done that, which is intended to cover, it's high enough to cover gas and hopefully part of the insurance. And
I mean,
I'm not sure though,
So
being
people-
how close we are to the police department though, that that's something that they're going to agree with, because if you're talking, 2 miles a day, that's never going to cover the costs of that vehicle.
I mean, if we would agree to the full-time officer, they should agree to that, taking responsibility for that vehicle. I mean, it's a give and take here, I would think.
Well, I can't see that happening.
Well, we can't agree to everything because, I'm sorry, you can't get his way. You can stomp your feet as much as you want, but come on, you gotta be reasonable, right?
You're still in a negotiation state here right now. I mean, yeah, I agree with Stan on that.
Well, if you talk to Mr. Gorman, I don't know him personally, but at that meeting, he was bound and determined not to give in and stand up and walk out. He thought we were going to agree with terms, and we weren't.
Yeah, and I wasn't there, so I'm going by what you guys are telling me. So yeah, that's yeah. But even if it is 75-25 and it's full time and they take care of the car and stuff, I guess that's what you use for negotiation then. You know what I mean? Or however you're gonna, you're still at this. I guess we're still debating whether full time or part time. Is really what's kind of happening here. So, I mean, there's still negotiation over what terms, I think.
So if we're going to take it to the constituency, do we have to know all these numbers exactly before we do that? Or we just throw out there where, do you want full-time or do you want part-time? I assume we kind of need some exacting numbers first.
I think it would be
Or don't we?
beneficial if you say full-time, part-time, or no, 3 options, and then define part-time. And you could have a couple different options. You could have 0.5 FTE, or you could do 3 days a week. That would be a 0.6. Is that a 0.6 FTE? I believe it is. So you could offer several options and see what the constituents select from among 3 or 4 options.
Then go back and do the final, if depending on what they say yes to, then go negotiate or if they say no, well, then you don't even have to worry about negotiating. But
Do you even have that option once they've voted? That's kind of a vote, right? So if there's more at this level, that's what you go with, or do you have the, if you're putting, sorry.
Certainly could. No, it's okay. We could certainly craft a motion. Mrs. O'Brien is probably going to kill me because she's the one that's going to have to do the book work for it. But we certainly can craft a motion and craft a presentation to give options as well. There would be no reason why we couldn't, that I'm aware of.
We would send that to Mr. Renning, and then he would put it into the resolution. He'd reframe the resolution then a little bit to, it's crafted now to be a yes or no question. But he'd craft it differently than to offer the different options.
I think that's the safe way to do it. That's up to you guys, but I'm gonna give everybody the option to whoever actually votes on it. Then if you don't vote and it's not the way you want it to be, then that's your own, your own fault, I guess. But
because right now it's a yes or no question, correct?
It's currently framed as a yes or no resolution. that I could go back, send the information back to him and tell him what you wanted. So there would be yes, full-time, there would be no, and then how do you want to define part-time? And do you want to define it in more than one way? Do you want more than one option?
Do you just define it as hours per week for part-time or?
0.5 would be 20 hours. 0.6 would be 24 hours. So it's the difference between 2.5 days a week, an equal split between one job and another, or it would be 3 days a week, a 0.6 FTE.
I think that's the way to go.
3 days a week?
The two options, 0.5 and then 3. Or do you think the 0.5 because it's a half a day isn't a good idea?
Well, if you went 3 days, you could go, I guess you can break it up however you want. Because if you want a couple hours at night for a event or whatever, or a couple different events, then,
Sure.
So, it wouldn't be I don't think it'd be a big deal. So you could do Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever, Tuesdays and Thursdays and some in between time or something. So
What some districts expressed when we had done the polling is, they essentially say that, even if it is a 0.5 or a 0.25, that it really comes down to, it might be an hour on a Monday, and then it might be 2 hours on a Friday for a football game. And then the following week, it might be 5 hours on a Tuesday and, 2 hours on a Thursday. So they've really had kind of some flexibility about how they staff it. And, really from a tactical standpoint, that's actually probably a prudent way of doing that, because if somebody knows exactly when the officer is going to be in the building because they're there at clockwork every day, it makes it really easy to do things that you shouldn't be doing, just based on when somebody's not watching you.
Agree. Do we need to make a motion on this?
If you would.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we present at the district meeting, the three options, the full-time, the 0.5,
0.6.
0.6, let's go with 0.6, and then and the no, none.
Luke Seeger, I second it.
Could someone repeat the motion for sake of clarity?
I said I'd like to make a motion to take to the annual meeting as a full-time SRO, and then a 0.6 SRO, and then a no as options.
Got it. I wrote it down correctly.
And I see we lost Joanne.
Yeah, her screen froze just before we lost her.
So
I'm sorry, I apologize. We had the motion by Mr. Johnson, and then something crazy happened. Do we have a second?
Luke Seeger, I second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
The only
apologize.
thing
Go ahead.
while you were gone is I had Mr. Johnson repeat it because I wanted to make sure I wrote it down correctly to get to Mr. Renning. And then you're back again.
All right, good. All right, so we had a motion by Mr. Johnson, a second by Mr. Seeger.
I do have a question. I keep on losing you guys, so I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, we can.
Okay, so when you have those options, now does that have the description of what it would cost to do those types of things, or is all that information going to go out to all the parents, everybody in the district prior to the annual meeting?
Yes, that was the purpose of meeting early, because we wanted to be able to have a public relations campaign regarding the resolution so that people would come informed to the meeting and either be able to ask educated questions about the proposal or to make an informed decision.
So when the scenarios are listed, so you have a 0.5, excuse me, it was a 1.0, would it have the cost, that kind of thing included in that question, or is it just going to be straight out a 1.0, a 0.6, or a no?
The resolution will have the three options. There'll be a separate table. I'm guessing it'll be kind of in the form of a simple table or spreadsheet that would show a range. So for a full-time, the range for single insurance or family insurance, kind of the range, then the 0.6, again, another range, and that'll depend again on the percentage that you settle on that you're going to, or we could share a couple of percentages. I know we've seen Carmen create tables that offer a couple of different scenarios.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Dr. Opper, do you want me to send you the last table that I made? It's in the shared drive, but I could send it to you if you would like to show it to the rest of the board. I don't know.
I can stop sharing and let you share too.
Okay.
Or it may be more relevant down the road depending on the direction
Right.
it takes.
Right.
But just all of that information has already been calculated. The table is already made. It was already used in last December, I believe, is when we met with the city. So it was that in that board packet. So it'll be December 16th of 2019.
If you want to go ahead and share, I stopped sharing. So if you want to go ahead and put it up, that would be great. And
okay.
And then we'd probably just ask for up-to-date figures because I know our numbers changed from last year. So just bearing in mind it's roughly a year old.
So that was right from a year ago, and what they had. So up at the top, you can see that the prorated police officer cost is the title, but they had said the salary and benefits for an officer with a family plan that would be under their insurance and their benefit package is around 66, and a single is 53. And then you can see the breakdown of what that is per hour, but that also includes the benefits. So, that's not their per hour rate. And then the price for different options, 100%, 70%, 50%, 20%. So I don't know if you want me to move that in any way, shape, or form, or if you want me to explain any of it.
I think we're personally good with it, Carmen.
Okay.
I would agree as well. I think if we, present that information ahead of time and we present it at the annual meeting as well, that'll give everyone the opportunity to, to make the best informed decision that they can.
I can email Logan tomorrow and see if those numbers have changed at all. But, you know, I wouldn't think that it would have changed a ton.
Perfect. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll then move into a roll call vote on the motion, which is presenting the 3 options at the district annual meeting. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And it is an aye on Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries by roll call vote. Mr. Holman is not present. Kind of the next topic that had been broached was providing a car for the officer. I don't know if that's something that we would look to negotiate. Or certainly if they're going to cover the cost this year, that could potentially be a topic of discussion next year at the annual meeting. Because I would think that that would also be part of a Fund 80 cost. If anyone has any thoughts on that.
Well, I think we got to see what the vote comes in at too. You know, maybe we won't need one. If it,
Very true.
I think though the electorate's probably going to ask, are there any other related costs? Because that wouldn't cause their taxes to go up. So they're probably going to want to know what percentage they're paying for. And they're probably going to want to know if they're being taxed also for a squad car. And if so, how much?
but we don't have that information. How much?
Right.
Chief did offer a figure. I don't recall exactly what it was. I think it was in the neighborhood of, what was it, 26,000 or?
Gosh.
He had talked about the Ford dealership, and after that, I'm not sure I remember the details.
Well, we're certainly not going to buy a car. Yeah.
I didn't quite feel as though there was a direct answer on that. So I think that we would probably have to solicit more information. And that might be wise. So that's able to be presented at the annual meeting as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Bruce, did you feel as though you had anything concrete?
No, he just offered a price of a car in general, not a fixed car. This is what a car costs. There was no figures thrown out for our portion or anything. It was just a, number for a vehicle. That was all that was thrown out there. Nothing else was thrown out there.
So that could be negotiable.
We may also
Has to
want
be, I don't know.
Well,
we may also want
if
to
you didn't say
inquire
this is
how
something
many
we bought,
other
you're paying for it.
You may want to inquire among other districts how many pay for the squad cars. Usually the arrangements that I've seen, the officer comes outfitted. The department provides them with a gun, with a taser, with their bulletproof vest. Either it's department issued or it's the officer's responsibility as part of their uniform to purchase in some instances, but I've not heard where the district's responsible for providing a vehicle or any of the other equipment that an officer normally carries. But I do think it's important.
Isn't that required equipment for a police officer to have a car?
No kidding.
I would assume so.
I mean, that would be part of his gun, his taser, his whatever he's got. I mean, that's standard equipment, I would think, from where you got a job.
Well, I know he had talked about right now they have 2 cars for 3 officers, so they're sharing. So that respect, I see where he's minorly coming from that way, but he wants to get the 3rd officer, then you have the 3rd vehicle, and they'll have 4 officers to be between 3 vehicles. So
Yeah, but he wants us to pay for it.
Yeah. Second year is the question. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
We did
Catch
point
22.
out that this is relationship based and the officer's probably only driving between the two properties, which we can see one from here. You know, so we're not going to be putting on a lot of miles. So paying the officer mileage for using their own vehicle to get to work. We don't pay our own staff to drive to and from work. We do pay mileage if during the course of their day, they're required to go to another facility. For example, if you have to drive daily to St. Paul's to provide a service and back, we log that, and then we pay the state rate for that mileage to the individual. But we do not pay them from the time they leave home until the time they get to school and back.
In all fairness, I did ask Officer Borst and Officer Wazlowski if maybe they couldn't just, you know, commandeer a car from somebody if they needed one.
Does it have to be a new car or can it be a used vehicle?
I'm not really sure. Chief did indicate that it's in his budget for them to purchase another squad car this year. And I just think that he's looking at some cost sharing of that going into next year, but there really was not a specific amount that was designated.
Yeah. We just need more information on that part of it. I mean, we could talk about it all night long, but until we actually know what he truly means, you know.
I agree.
So then perhaps we need to reach out to Chief and ask him specifically what it is that they're asking as far as a vehicle. He did also indicate that as far as the city versus district cost share, that the city had come to an agreement that it would be 75% district, 25% city. I am not sure if that is something that the city is willing to negotiate and if they're willing to take on a bigger piece. Obviously, we would be looking at hiring somebody, you know, roughly 10 months out of the year, and we would not need them for 2 of those 10 months, regardless of if they're full-time or part-time.
Well, and who says we're going to be in school the way this is going right now? Full time.
Right. And that's part of it. You know, of course, we do want to look ahead. You know, what's next year going to look like? What's the following year going to look like? Obviously, this year is an exception. And we don't know how long, you know, should the citizenry pass this in October, it gives us the ability to get that job description out there and to start to look for somebody. But we might not find a candidate until next school year. Honestly, I mean, we just simply don't know.
All right, like Russ said, can we just defer this to 2021? I mean, because there's 0 calls to the police right now, and you know we may go into virtual, so we're paying for nothing.
We still want to take it to the citizens or whatever, right? And we don't have to act on it right away, correct? Am I right? Like to have the vote to the annual meeting? Because if we wait till next year, then we're already into to even go forward on this, or am I incorrect on that?
Usually our annual meetings, at least in the years I've been here, have been in the month of October, which means, you know, as President Johnson shared, if you in the meetings at the end of the month of October, so that means in November you'd be posting a position. You need to post it for a few weeks at the least, you know, to allow people to apply, which is around Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it might not be the optimal time to apply for a new job. Then we have to conduct interviews and get them lined up. So the whole process does take a little while to hire a new person, maybe a month or 2, if you fast track it.
Right. So if we wait until Go ahead.
I was under the assumption that if we pass it, if it gets passed in October, that we wouldn't put this into effect until next school year.
No, it would be for this tax year. It would be for immediate implementation unless you wanted it worded differently. Then I would have to tell Mr. Running that. He wrote it as though it were going into immediate effect. If you want it delayed by a year, I can have him change the wording.
What happens at the annual meeting, though, this is Carmen, what happens at the annual meeting is you're certifying the levy. So you're deciding how much you're going to tax. And if you include the cost of this at that meeting, we are going to tax the constituents that amount of money. And I would expect that they would expect that we spend that amount of money. So we don't want to not spend it if we're not going to use it. Or we don't want to tax it if we're not going to use it, excuse me.
Okay.
So there are two pieces of this. The resolution that the citizens first approve is whether or not they want the district to enter into an agreement with the city or another entity to have an SRO program in the district. Then the second decision you make is approving the budget. So you can approve to enter into the agreement this year. You can approve to enter into the agreement next year. And then Carmen would adjust the budget to tax appropriately in Fund 80, whether it starts this year or it doesn't get applied to Fund 80 until the next annual meeting.
I'm not trying to cause any confusion. If that's what it is, I'm fine.
Phrasing it that way. Well, when you phrase it that way, it sounds like we're budgeting for it immediately, but yet we haven't negotiated yet to find out exactly what's going to cost us for a car, for other things. So we're flying blind, you know. So it almost makes sense to do, well, Russ, even though you were just asking, didn't really know, it almost makes sense to do it that way. But otherwise, like I say, we're going to be taxing, voting it in, say, yes, we'll take a full time, and then say, okay, we're going to tax 17 cents. And then it's like, but we don't know the exact numbers yet. So how can we exactly do that? That's real hard to do.
Right. And I
Sorry,
certainly
now we got a
100%
half-hour discussion. Sorry.
No, I totally agree with you, Bruce. And that's really kind of what the problem has been all along. I know I was contacted by Councilperson Eck, and she asked, what are we going to do? Because the city needs to set their budget. And I said, well, we don't know what we're going to do because we don't know what's going to happen until it goes to the annual meeting and people vote on it. Mrs. Brisky had just put in the chat box, as a community member, I feel it's going to be hard to get people to vote yes for any SRO at this time. And I don't disagree with her. The financial situation for a lot of families right now is really rather precarious. And to ask them to be taxed additionally, regardless if it's a parent or if it's a retiree, a lot of people have really been damaged by this pandemic financially. And, I'm not sure that it's something that people even are going to entertain right now. And that's really why we want to give as much disclosure as we possibly can. This is what the cost is going to be to you. So either we throw it out there and we see where the chips fall, or we hold off on it.
Or
To Luke's point,
you put it out there and you state that it will be implemented in the 2021-22 school year.
Yes,
with the estimate of what you think it's going to cost.
So were we to do that procedurally, would it essentially be a resolution passing, having one, And then next year, we would have to pass another resolution designating the specific amount that we would be taxing in that community fund.
You annually, you do the budget. So the budget hearing, you approve the budget as the school board. There's a budget hearing during the annual meeting. The constituency is approving whether or not the board is approved to enter into the arrangement to have an SRO, which is separate from the budget hearing, which comes later. But you, the board, approve that. So the two are connected, but you kind of define the timeline.
Well, what do you guys think?
Well, personally, I think it makes a lot of sense to put it out there, see if the constituency is yes, well, the 0.6 or no, and then go forward from there. I know it's going to take a little longer than we wanted, but this year is probably not going to make a big difference anyway. But that's just my opinion.
And they can't say we aren't, the chief of police can't say we're not moving on it, because we are. It's just at a slower rate than he probably likes.
Well, and then you find out and at the annual meeting, maybe it's, if it's a no, it's like, well, then it's all this for nothing. But then we know the constituency's opinion. And
right, and some of them may actually vote differently if we had it this year versus next, put into effect this year versus next year.
Right. That's what I was saying. That's what I was thinking too, Russ. Yeah, it's a hard year no matter what. So.
And you're also looking at, the candidate pool as well. If anybody is in school, that they would graduate in the May time frame. Yeah, I don't know what the candidate pool looks like. If they're struggling to find officers now, waiting, like putting it out there, all the information out there now, and then it would go to the 21-22 school year.
As Carmen spoke to the finance committee a little bit about the state of the district's budget, we're doing quite well this year, all things considered. We don't know what's going to happen with the next biennial budget, but due to COVID, you're probably going to see some of the lagging results, that there are going to need to be some budget adjustments that will probably come out in the next year. We also know as a district that our FTEs are going to be down, both in summer school and the third Friday in September count. Those are the counts that determine the state aid. They go into the formula and have a direct result on the amount of aid you're going to have in the next budget cycle. So that's also a point to consider. Next year's budget may be a more challenging budget than this year. Carmen, is there anything more from a business manager's point of view that you'd want to say about budget projections?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. This year we're doing okay. Next year we just don't know, and really there has not been any comments, statewide about any of it. So it's very difficult to even make a prediction at this point. I believe after the election in November, maybe people will start talking about it, but I'll bet you not until January, February. So next year it's going to be a tight turnaround in trying to figure out what we need to do in staff and program changing. And this position is a position on top of anything that we do in staff and program changes. But I can tell you that if we have to cut 2 teachers because of, aid projections, it's not going to go over well with our community if we add on an SRO officer. That's my opinion.
I would agree with Mrs. O'Brien.
That seems very logical.
So would someone like to make a motion as to how they would like to frame this? Did we freeze and lose everyone again?
Well, I'm just trying to think, are we talking the vehicle part, or are we talking about how we want to proceed if we're just going to do informational? Now they vote how they want to move forward, or what the cost and everything is going to be to start in the next school year. I guess I'm not following.
Yeah, I'm kind of lost on what we're making a motion on too.
Sure. Well, that's I guess what I'm asking the question of, so really the discussion's kind of been left at, do we want to take this to the taxpayers, ask them, do you want to move forward on having an SRO? What exactly are you looking for? And then moving into having this take effect in the 2021 school year, at which time we would have concrete numbers to present at the October 2021 annual meeting.
So we're kind of leaning towards trying to approve something that would be for the 21-22 school year. So we're kind of saying.
That's what I'm hearing. I don't know if that's what you're saying. That's, I guess, why I'm looking for some clarity.
What I thought I was hearing, that's what I wondered. That's what I thought I was kind of hearing.
Yep, that's what I kind of heard too.
So we're basically taking Russ's motion and just kind of adding just a little more to it. Is that what we're kind of looking at?
I would suggest a new motion, and how you'd like to frame that. Just trying to think of a good way to potentially frame.
We still looking at putting it out there for the 1 year 0.6 and the no, or are we back to a simpler question of,
I think,
do you want a SRO or don't you?
I don't know.
Just asking.
That's the $1 million question for everyone to decide.
I think you need something more firm than that. Otherwise, we're back to next year in October without clear direction on what it is the citizenry is authorizing for hire. So we won't be hiring during prime season in the summer. We'll be back to waiting until October for another answer.
Well, no, not exactly, because if you agree to, if the citizenry says yes to full-time or yes to a 0.6, we already know what we're looking for. So we can go out and look for it because we would know the numbers.
I think I
Then
misunderstood
we just have to
you.
go back.
I thought you were saying just a yes or no.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
what I was
sorry.
kind of wondering.
I misunderstood you. I'm sorry.
So what are, yes, I'm going to ask a quick question. Hopefully this doesn't draw it out any longer, but, so what are our options if, say we do go forward and we, ask them what they want, no half-time, full-time, and then it comes to next year and that's when we're going to put it in effect in 2021 and the budget doesn't allow it. How do we, because I myself don't want to lose any teachers or aides or anybody else either. Then where are we?
But
It's the fund aid, so you tax for it.
You tax for it, so it doesn't matter. Okay.
Yes, we tax for it.
So maybe the simplest way of doing this is that we go forward and we ask the question, are you interested in implementing it? And if so, are you looking at full-time? Are you looking at a part-time? Or are we looking at not at all? And then based on that, we look at implementing it, that gives us the authority to move forward with it. Then we would move forward the following year at the annual meeting of actually taxing for it from Fund 80.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. My head hurts.
Yeah. Or we add one more line and say 2021 or 2022. Can you do that?
Well, I think you'd want to be specific enough to say that, that we would be looking to hire for the 2021-2022 school year.
Okay.
Which for us our fiscal year starts on July 1. This position would start on September 1st. So let's say they authorize a full-time. We would post it and we would do the interview process and we'd have somebody lined up and ready to start their new job on September 1st of next year, 2021.
Right. So then if we didn't bring this to, so if we asked for the 2021 or 21-22, like we were talking about, then it would start already in September, or would it be the following year? Actually, it would start in September.
It would start in September.
Okay.
Yeah,
so really, that's where we're really at right now anyway.
I know it sounds strange, but the annual meeting that you have at the end of this month is setting the budget, and you talk about your levy, but you've already been in a quarter of the year already. It started on July 1.
Okay.
So in that regard, the ship has already sailed.
Right. So we shouldn't even be asking for this year anyway. Otherwise, we have to implement it right away. And I mean, we should be really truly asking for next year anyhow.
Yeah.
If you asked for it, what we do in any other situation would be prorated. As soon as we were able to get the person lined up, we'd prorate how much is owed for the remainder of the year.
And if it was an issue, we would do that. But I don't think right now with COVID and everything, we just don't have that issue. So I don't think we need to be that quick on it.
Absolutely. I agree.
So Joanne, are you looking for a friendly amendment to the original motion on the full-time 0.6 or no for implementation in the 2021-22 school year, or just a separate motion regarding the implementation date?
I think a separate motion is acceptable.
So a separate motion just on the part of the implementation date, or do you want the full thing in there?
No, I think just the implementation date is acceptable.
Well, then I'll make the motion that we, if if this passes, I don't guess you don't need to say that. Make a motion that the implementation date of this SRO would be the beginning of the 2021-22 school year.
I have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Stan Forbes, second.
I have a motion, or excuse me, a second by Mr. Forbes. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll move in by a roll call vote. Mr. Seeger,
Aye.
Mr. Forbes,
Aye.
Mrs. Petke,
Aye.
Mr. Scheller,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and it is an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries by roll call vote. Mr. Holman is absent. I believe that we have covered everything that we need to regarding this subject. Is there anything else that I missed, Dr. Opper?
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Okay. So then our next item on the agenda is to discuss the Waupaca County Public Health Emergency COVID-19 Alert Issue 10/5/2020 and our response.
Okay, so numbers continue to rise. There were 112 new cases this weekend. The public health emergency is most closely connected to hospitalizations and deaths. Mr. Wood let us know that our local hospitals are at capacity. Previously, they were taking our local hospitals within the county were taking patients from some of the larger facilities. When they reached capacity, they were redirecting some of the patients to some of the smaller hospitals. The smaller hospitals are now also at capacity. So again, the request was, as he put it, to implore the public to assist in controlling community spread. One of the very real circumstances that some of our near neighbors have already faced is needing to close school buildings and go all virtual due to either staffing issues, large amount of community spread and the student rate of infection, or in some instances, a combination of both. Things here in the district are tenuous at best. There was new information even since last we talked. We do believe we have staffing at this time to cover this school week. But as I've talked to President Johnson, that could be one phone call away from being an entirely different story. So we just want to be totally transparent with the community about the possibility of needing to go all virtual. If that were to occur, my first step after talking to the Department of Health would be to call a special board meeting for you to authorize and endorse the closing of school buildings and moving to an all virtual arrangement. So just to make clear in everybody's mind, there were some handouts in the board packet about some added details, just so everyone would understand what that would look like. And if you have any concerns or questions, if you can share those this evening, that gives the administrative team some time to adapt, modify, edit, alter, add to the plan so that it best meets our community's needs.
Does anyone have any questions? I know a lot of our neighboring districts have had to move forward in this manner, and some of them at little to no notice. Certainly, we want to keep the kids in school as best as it comes down to what happens and what happens outside of our control and our staffing levels.
What's our number of kids being infected by the virus?
I'm not able to share that information because of HIPAA. I can tell you that the number of people in quarantine and awaiting tests has gone up in the last 3 hours.
So you can't even tell us a quantity.
Um,
I don't care who it is. A number.
right now, in terms of already received results, we have one positive case in the district, and then we have several in quarantine, where another member of the household is positive, and then we have other people awaiting test results. But one of the things, because of HIPAA, we just have to be extremely cautious that we're not giving any identifiable information about who, which is why we don't say if it's children or staff or that kind of thing. We're needing to be somewhat cautious about that. I don't mean to be evasive. I'm just trying to be very cautious so that we don't end up violating someone's HIPAA rights.
Really at this point, and maybe you should just reiterate this, Dr. Opper, the issue that we're really running into is that we have staff absences and we don't have subs.
Correct. And we are using creative solutions right now to cover classrooms. And right now we have classes covered for this week with the current number of people that we believe are going to be out. But again, just like happened over the weekend, one phone call and that had a huge impact. So one positive case, the branches are like a tree. It just tends to extend out, and all of a sudden more and more, we find out more and more people are impacted by that and are unable either to be at work or be in school. It starts to get really complicated. But we've understood your priority as a board is to stay with in-person instruction for as long as possible. So that's how we as an admin team have been tackling this. How do we keep in-person academic instruction going? And we've put that ahead of everything else. And so it's really important, I guess, for our admin team to hear you affirm, is that still the priority?
I'd say yes from my standpoint.
I also say yes.
That'd be a yes from me.
Yes, from me too.
Yes.
And from me as well.
May I
And
ask
just to be clear, sure, go ahead, Dr. Upper.
May I ask a more difficult question then? What if that means temporarily suspending either athletic, co-curricular competitions or practices? Does that change your priority when that comes into the mix?
I know if I'll just throw
Go
my
ahead.
2 cents. If I know if none of the student athletes that, like, say, are in cross country have tested anything positive. It seems, I would hate to see them punished, so to speak, for doing things right, wearing their masks, all that stuff. You know, if it goes virtual and they can't finish their season, because we're within like 2.5 weeks of finishing the season, and you're going to miss out on your conference tournament. You're going to miss out on the, you know, your sectional. I would hate to see that happen. If, you know, when, you know, it's all going to get shut down next, if it happened, you know, they're going to miss, you know, prime time of their season. You hate to see it happen, but I don't want to see it.
But with some of the other districts closing already, what impact has that had thus far? I mean, some of the games have been canceled, that I've been hearing, you know, from the local district.
I know Menominee Indian, they took 2 weeks off and they came back. Van de Wel took, I think they're right now taking a couple weeks off, like cross country, and then they should be back. So the timing would be pretty lousy if it happened, you know, if it happened around here in the next like 2 weeks, then you get shut down. That would be poor timing, you know.
Right,
End of the
but
season,
that's also an outdoor. That's also an outdoor sport. Now you're looking at volleyball. You're looking at football.
Football is an outdoor sport too, and I feel the same way Bruce does. They've done everything right. I've been at every game. They put their mask on. They come on the sidelines. They've done everything right. Why punish these kids? They got to have some normalcy in their life. We pull some of this stuff away without any positive tests. You're going to have kids on drugs. You're going to have kids not doing homework. I just feel I feel totally different if there's a positive case, but if there isn't a positive case, that's the way I feel, that we should continue on.
But if other districts are already closing, what impact does that have on our district? Because you can't have a competition if there's no other schools that they can compete against.
Well, I know of schools already that, and not saying that's what we would do, but I know of the school, Hortonville was one of them. Their game got canceled two days before their game. They found out on Wednesday night. By Thursday, they had a game with someone else the next day. They found another game that somebody else was willing to play that had their competition backed out. So I think right now the team, you know, like this week we play Amherst. I haven't heard anything about Amherst not going to play. And I guess if it happens, it happens. But
in cross country, you have like, you know, it's all conference teams, and there's like, I think tonight there's like 6 teams there. So, you know, if one would have a problem, you know, you'd still have 5. So we can still have a competition. As long as there's at least 2 teams there, you can still have a competition. So that one's a little simpler. Like I say, it's an outdoor sport. Hopefully, as long as there's no positive tests, you know.
So Mr. Wote says that if the change to virtual is primarily due to staff shortages and not positive cases within the student and coaches ranks, you might consider continuing with competitions, but perhaps with increased measures such as fewer in-practices and no fans. Do keep in mind that staffing shortages are also due to overall community spread. And this is just a suggestion. Legal counsel is comfortable with that as well.
I know, like tonight's meet at Marion was supposed to be no fans, and our meet on Thursday in Wawega is no fans, other than coaches and players. So we're already doing that.
So did you all get a chance to look at the handouts on what was proposed from the high school on athletics and co-curriculars, the all virtual plan? I think it reflects what you just said, but just wanted to make sure you had a chance to look at that.
yes.
Yep, read it. Yep. This is first sentence says positive student cases. Well, I was just hoping, as long as it's not one of our athletes, you know, it's maybe a little broader, but we got to keep everybody healthy. So yeah,
that says student athlete, which is what we call them, They're a student first and an athlete second.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. And then the bowling it just started. I thought they did a nice job with putting together their bowling plan. Again, given the complexity of it being held in a public facility. So you have their plan now. Mr. Wout did look at their plan. And let's see. I think we've looked at everything then. Any additional direction from the board then in terms of the all virtual, if it came to that? Take you back to the academic program.
If you're thinking about moving to all virtual, you would have a special meeting for us? Is that what I heard earlier?
Right. Due to COVID, they allow for 2 hours notice. I try to give you more than 2 hours, but these days, boy, things happen mighty fast. So I might not be able to give you more than 2 hours, but there is a special new 2-hour rule.
Okay.
It could be on a weekend. It could be in the evening. So it might be one of those things where I get a call at 5 in the afternoon and I call a meeting for 7 or 8 o'clock, or it might be I get a call on Friday night and at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday we have a meeting or so forth, just so you know.
Would we be notified just email, or could we also get a call? Because weekends, I don't think anyone's looking at their email. Is that possible or not?
Calls and text messages. I know you also get your text
Sure.
too. So,
Calls
sure.
and text messages, yes, because then we'll for sure have a better chance of seeing it.
Yep, that's a good idea. Will do. Thank you. That's a great idea.
I think it just really needs to be reiterated that we are in a very tenuous spot, and this is a house of cards, and it can come crumbling down at any moment. And it might not necessarily even be COVID related. It's the fact that we literally do not have subs. And so if you have one staff member that's out quarantining and another one has to have an emergency appendectomy, and somebody else falls down and becomes injured, we've exceeded our amount of subs. So it's very, very precarious, and every district in our area is facing the same exact situation now when it comes to subbing. So it literally is going to be a minute by minute thing, and the more that the community can understand that, and the more that people understand to stay home when you don't have to go somewhere, and wash your hands and social distance and do all the things that you're supposed to do, the better chances we have to be able to keep the school open.
Are the subs more so monitoring a room, or they actually have to go in and teach a lesson right now?
That would depend. If the teacher is able, they can teach remotely. And in some instance, it depends too on if the staff member we're talking about is a teacher. I'll give you an example. Food service or custodial work can't be done remotely. So it kind of depends on where we're experiencing the shortages in our staffing. But with the teachers, we're getting very creative. I know Ms. Brower enjoyed a day with little children last week, and said it was a great deal of fun. So we're just getting creative. At the high school, teachers on their prep periods are covering for other teachers. So that's often a way to take care of that. And they are, of course, compensated for that.
Yeah, it sounds like staff is going above and beyond for doing their duties. So they're doing a great job, it sounds like.
They absolutely are. You can be extremely proud of everyone, for sure.
Absolutely.
I didn't have anything else.
Nor do I. With that being said, next meeting dates tomorrow is a curriculum committee meeting at 6:30. That will be virtual. The 7th, the staff recognition and employee appreciation is going to be held at 2:30. That will be now virtual. 7th, buildings and grounds at 5:30 virtual. 14th, policy and human resources, 5 o'clock virtual. 19th, Finance Committee at 5:30. October 19th also is our regular board meeting at 7. The 26th is the annual district meeting at 7 o'clock. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Before that, Mr. Seeger had indicated the curriculum meeting tomorrow night. He has a conflict and wondered if the time could be moved up.
All right. How much you talking, Luke?
Even if we could do 6 o'clock.
Well, that's no problem at all. But I like to say, for me, cross country is done at 4:30, 4:45. So anything after that would be open.
Yeah.
So I don't know about Russ, where he's at.
Yeah, it's up to whatever you guys. I mean, I'll be back in town probably about 4 o'clock. I just before probably 6:30, 6:45, I got to be somewhere. So
If you're talking Russ Holman, he may have some conflicts with the meeting period. Just talking with him today a little bit, he's got going on that I'm not sure he'll be available. Maybe he will, but I'm just saying he may not be.
Then we'd probably need the two remaining members of the committee in order to have a quorum it should be a 10 or 15 minute meeting, but there are a couple of time sensitive items to move forward if possible.
Well, if 6 would get it done for you, Luke, that would work fine for me. If we can, we'll try to get Russ, give him a call and try to find out if that works for him. But as long as 2 of us can make it, that's 6, no problem.
yeah, I'm good at 6.
Well, duly noted then, curriculum committee will be at 6 p.m. tomorrow instead.
And I had a question. Is anything needed for the staff recognition, employee appreciation thing on? Do we need to do more stuff with that, or are you kind of done?
Well, I'm going to Apple. I'm going. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Mr. Johnson is going to go on a quest for apples tomorrow. And Dr. Apple has procured some cookies for the staff. I have taken care of some mixed nuts. And so the cost of the cookies and the cost of the apples potentially are what needs to be divvied up. And if somebody wants to provide something else, Dr. Upper, when exactly do you want the items to be delivered to the school, and where should they go?
We could start with district office, then I can have Stephanie assist me in getting them delivered to the mailboxes at both buildings. And whenever it's convenient, if they're non-perishable items, you can even bring them tomorrow would be fine. Otherwise, it would be helpful no later than noon so that we have ample time to get them into the mailboxes so that people have them in the afternoon.
So noon on Wednesday or noon on Tuesday?
Noon on Wednesday would be the very latest, but if you happen to have them tomorrow and you wanted to drop them off, that would be just fine.
Oh, I don't think you'll be there when I come back, possibly. So I'll bring them Wednesday morning.
All right, was there anything else that we needed to discuss? Okay, then I would be looking for a motion to adjourn, please.
So move. Bruce Scheller, so move.
I have a motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Stan Forbes, second.
Okay, second by Mr. Forbes. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will move forward to adjourn by roll call vote. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And it is an aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion to adjourn carries at 8:14 p.m.